Contenders, ready! Gladiators, ready! 3, 2, 1, the Gladiators!
Hello and welcome to the GladPod in association with Gladiators TV. I'm David Blackmore and here once more joining me on my gladiatorial journey is Jet and of course producer Paul. And these weeks just absolutely fly by, don't they? I can't believe we're already so many episodes in already. Thanks to everyone who continues to like and share this podcast on social media. Another call out for those of you that have passed on the podcast. If it's been passed on to you and you couldn't believe that you didn't have it in your life before, get in touch, gladpod@gladiatorstv.com and share your stories, your glad stories. But diving into the mailbag for this week, and I found this letter from Ben Darling. I love that surname, Darling. He'd love to hear from Scorpio and Saracen on the podcast. And I know that previously we mentioned about trying to get both on, actually. But this is what caught my eye. So not only was Scorpio a firm favourite for him for a long time, in a strange twist, he ended up dating one of her best friends in 2013. So it got me thinking, have you ever dated someone with a connection to a gladiator? Because I think we asked previously anyone that maybe would have dated a gladiator, but yeah, someone that you've dated that had a connection to a gladiator. Or do you have any stories? Make it really, really like tangible. Any stories of knowing people who knew people who knew people who worked with a gladiator or knew a gladiator or once had a beer with a gladiator? I want to hear some of those stories because I'm sure that there are some like classic urban myth stories about, I don't know, wolf eating a bat in a pub or something along those lines. But yeah, get in touch. I'm gladpod@gladiatorstv.com. Ben also says Scorpio would be brilliant on the podcast because she has a background in drama and also has a story with Jet about them auditioning for the same role as She-Wolf. And I didn't know if you just wanted to touch ever so slightly on this element to it. And Paul, you know quite a bit about this, don't you?
Yes, we touched upon She-Wolf in episode 1 of this second series with Di. So yeah, the She-Wolf was amazing basically because it linked Jet and Scorpio together, which all of the Glad fans knew back in the day. And it was only actually when I was researching for the episodes that I came across She-Wolf on YouTube. I'd never actually seen the video footage of it before. I'd seen photos of Di obviously dressed up as a wolf, but I'd never seen the actual transformation. To know that Scorpio was kind of so close to being the wolf was, just fascinating back in the day.
And he adds as well that there's the infamous contender who greased her legs, so she was able to get away from Scorpio. I'm sure this is something we've mentioned on the pod before, isn't it, Paul?
Oh, probably. It was such an iconic moment in Gladiators. Nicola Borden in Series 1. She kind of bended the rules a little bit. There was no official rule at the time about greasing your legs on the wall, and she kind of took advantage of that, much to Scorpio's very kind of big disappointment because she lost the event. John Anderson was not happy either, but obviously because it wasn't official in the rules at the time, they couldn't really do too much about it, and it was included ever since. But it was a stroke of genius, I think, in some extent, that she decided to do that, but obviously not in the spirit of Gladiators. And I do remember back in the days just noticing how very angry Scorpio was, which was very gladiatorial, especially with her big curly hair, what she had at the time, and big bright red lipstick. Yeah, she was not a happy lady about greasing her legs.
Because one thing that I've noticed that, Di, you talk about quite a lot actually is how you had a plan for every event. But aside from greasing up the legs, were there any other contender hacks that you can remember that either you kind of then used yourself or ones that you were like, well, they're just being plain cheeky, aren't they?
I think for me, I'd just say to anybody, just be quick, because I'm quicker. Just be really quick. But you're right, though. I would think I was kind of a thinking athlete, and I guess I still am. I kind of think things through before I do it, visualise it, look for the path of least resistance, and how does that work on my body? So how can I get the best for myself from that. So, for instance, the wall, I think it was Hunter that started this, to actually get the advantage to catch up with your contender as they were taking the time limits bigger and bigger from their head start on us. We worked out a jump start, and on the left-hand side of the wall, I think I've got a really good jump start going, which meant I could be kind of up probably by about 15 foot within 4 or 5 seconds. So I think with the contenders, I just wanted to say, just be quick. I always feel sorry for the contenders because they get such limited exposure to the events. So a lot of them had to kind of mentally think their way through an event before they were actually exposed to competing on it against us, who'd had by then probably a lot more experience at the events than they had. So for the contenders, it was, be quick and have tenacity. And I think Eunice and all of our champions, all of them, anyone who entered that arena as a contender, would have had that in spades, because you wouldn't have been able to survive without it. Quick, tenacity. They were my 2 tips, and no greasing of the legs. I think what I did, though, is I would actually pull people's clothes off to get them off Hang Tough or the wall. There was a bit of, not foul play, but you got to grab onto something and keep it legal.
Yeah, you do. And I love this last line from Ben. Saracen would be amazing on GladPod, as he was just so gorgeous and smiley. I'd love to be described as someone as gorgeous and smiley. He must have many stories about balancing a career as a firefighter with being a gladiator. Di, for you, what was Saracen like as a gladiator and as a person?
Just one of the coolest people I think you could ever want to meet. You know, his kind of, there's only one Saracen, that slow kind of knowing nod pretty much sums him up. I think being a firefighter, and he's not long retired, so I believe, he'll have seen a lot of the world. You know, he's kind of seen a lot within his job, and quite heartbreaking stuff as well. So I think when you're that kind of rounded and still survive it, and you know, do good service like NHS and services, etc., and that becomes part of your vocation in life, it kind of sums up the person too. So what you saw is what you get. He was just so cool, very dry sense of humour, and so kind, and a gentleman, which you don't get an awful lot of throughout the last few decades, in my view. So yeah, that's what I remember from him.
Oh, that's nice. And Paul, what about you as a super fan? What was Saracen like for you as first of all watching him as a gladiator, and then presumably meeting him a few times after?
Yeah, he was an awesome gladiator. I always remember, probably one thing that stands out in my mind is watching the tryout videos where you could see the gladiators trying out to obviously win their role on the show, and he was climbing the rope, and you were supposed to do it either up and down 3 times, I think it was, if you were using your legs, or just once if you didn't use your legs. And he went up and down 3 times without using his legs before the poor guy next to him had even managed to do it once using his legs. So I think the producers must have known that they'd got somebody special when they saw that, and everybody was cheering around him and stuff. From meeting him, like Di said, really, he was just a really nice guy. But I would always liken him to be kind of the gentle giant of the gladiators. He was kind of so cool, calm, kind of just really solid gladiator, really, and obviously stayed with the show from the very start to the very end as well. Yeah, great glad.
Well, I think we said it quite consistently throughout Series 1 and now in Series 2 as well. We would love to have Saracen on the show. We are trying to get Saracen on the show, and comments like this. So do keep sending in why you'd like to have Saracen on the show, because I reckon we should send them all to him so he could just see how much he's loved and how much they'd want to hear from him. And as I said before, if there's a gladiator that you follow on social media that hasn't been on the GladPod yet, or you happen to bump into him into the street randomly, tell him how much you'd love to hear their story on the show. Honestly, it really helps us when we're speaking to some of these parties and they're like, yeah, no, A, I've already heard of the GladPod, and B, people keep telling me about it, so I have to do it. So that's always good. And as always, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. And remember, you can get in touch with your own Glad stories by emailing gladpod@gladiatorstv.com. Right, let's get on with this week's episode.
3, 2, 1.
Their friends and family know them as Jenny and Wayne. I know them as Jenny and Wayne. But to all Gladiator revival fans and the whole of the rest of the world, they'll know them as Gladiators, Enigma and Doom, who join us now. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
We're all good here at the other end of Glad World.
It's Gladiators! Welcome to the Mecca of Muscle for another night of fights between 4 contenders and 16 men and women with superhuman strength. Let's get it on! Bring out the heroes and make this show happen. It's the Gladiators! It's Enigma.
So it's a few years beyond when you've been gladiatorial, but your lives are gladiatorial. So let's start. Where should we start, David and producer Paul? Should we go right back to the beginning?
Well, I think so, definitely, because I'm not so sure that we've had people that have started their gladiatorial journey by bobsleighing.
It's true. Everyone thinks we got together on Gladiators, but we actually met in the mountains at the World Championships in Canada, like back in 2005.
2005, yeah.
And before that, Jenny, you represented GB in long jump and pentathlon as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that's correct. You've been Googling.
What do you think it was about sort of bobsleigh and long jump and pentathlon that actually helped you become the gladiators that you ended up being?
I think as elite athletes, we trained 6 days a week, 2 to 4 hours a day. We were speed, strength, power based. We had great strength to body weight ratio. And we had that mindset. We realized actually when we retired that most athletes think they're better than they are. And you go into a room and you don't think about wanting to be friends with anyone or the process or the journey. You just literally want to be the best, be the winner, and take everyone else down. So all that training, I competed from the age of 10, stood me in great stead to be the badass that was Enigma.
I love that. Be the best, be the strongest, all of the things that as gladiators. It was such a gladiatorial line there, Jenny.
It's true. I realised when I retired, I spent the majority of my life believing I was much better than I was as well. And I went to this aerial hoop class with a friend, and I walked in, I was like, right, I want to be the best aerial hooper there ever was in like my first class. And then thought, maybe I need to soften this down a little bit. Now I'm not competing anymore for Great Britain or running around the arena as Enigma. So yeah, I've become a little softer, I think, in my 30s.
That looked very hard.
Yeah, it was tough, and I was challenged there at the end of the day. But you know what? It's not over until I get what I want. Bring it on!
Yvette, did you drop something? Because you seemed to spend so much time on the floor, I thought you were looking for some of your bling.
Do you say the same for yourself, Wayne? Because I know, like you, Jenny, it's been an amazing journey, because I've taught as well as performed and competed, and I find that I like to be a participant in classes and be fed the next move or the next combination or whatever. And it's quite humbling, isn't it, to suddenly go, right, I'm only competing with myself right now. I don't have to be the best in class. And you know what I mean? And does that happen for you too, Wayne? Because as we get a little bit older, you have to bring that in a little bit, don't you, to become more human from being gladiatorial.
It's true, you do. You do tend to hone it down a little bit. But the thing is I have to ask myself the question now, why? Because, with everything leading up to Gladiators, I compete in many different sports, whether it's some form of martial arts, boxing, whatever it was, track and field. Like Jenny, you always want to be the best. And then you take that mindset into the gladiator arena and you still want to be the best. It doesn't matter who's in front of you. You've only got one train of thought and one mission. So outside of the gladiator arena, I have to sometimes ask myself, why? I go to yoga class, it becomes competitive. It's ridiculous.
The poor little old lady to your right, Matt, is like, the gladiator Doom is competing with me in my downward dog.
It's literally everything I get, and I really have to stop myself and ask myself, why? Why do I need to compete against these people? Because there is no outcome other than then I'm just going to look maybe silly in trying to, do some kind of, bind move, So
Wayne's talking about eagle arm in yoga because his pecs are so big. He can't cross his palms and he ends up doing this weird origami arm situation. It's the one, he has very flexible hamstrings but cannot do an eagle arm.
I think as, gladiators, we are by nature's competitors, and we are driven, which is what sets us apart from everyone else. Being athletes, you have this mentality where you just want to be the best, and regardless of what age, you just want to be the best,
It's like a fire you can't put out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. 2 points is better than nothing, but all credit to Doom Gloom. He got me.
He did. The Doom and the Gloom got you. And Doom! This is my day. Doomsday.
There's so much to go into here, but I don't know about you guys, but I'd love to know, let's go back to the beginning about how Glads approached you for the revival. What happened? What was going on there at the very beginning before you actually entered the arena?
Well, there are two sides of the stories today. So I'll let Jenny tell hers. For her version, because then I'll correct it on the way.
I went to Loughborough University to do my sports science degree, and my housemate ended up being an accountant at Sky One, and she called me and she was like, Pace, everyone called me Pacey at uni, they're bringing Gladiators back. You and Wayne would be incredible. This is the producer's details. Email all your pictures and CV and videos. So we did that and we got an email back rejecting us both. And then a few days later, we got a phone call on the landline, which is really unusual. And they were asking for Wayne. No one calls you landline. And they're like, oh, is Wayne there? I'm like, who is it? And they're like, oh, it's the producers at Sky One. We're looking for him to audition to be a gladiator. And I basically, in my stubborn self, was like, you can't have him without me. And we were more than happy come to the audition, but we both have to audition. So this poor producer agreed, and we ended up going to a contender audition, but as gladiators or as potential gladiators. And there was, I think, 10 different physical events from sprints to medicine ball throws to triple jumps, all sorts of speed, agility, quickness, strength tests. And I ended up being the highest scorer of any man or woman on the day, and immediately being then put through to the next round of the gladiator trials. But poor Wayne had a slightly different experience.
In amongst all of this, I mean, as soon as you go, let's start exercising, I sweat like a monster. Probably after the first event, I just started sweating. So we all had this stick-on number that we had to place on our chest or some part of our body. But mine fell off, and there was another black guy that was in my group that was part, and he had the same problem. So his number came off, my number came off. So as we moved around the different events, I knew for a fact they had criteria, and I smashed those criteria, whether it be the jumps or the throws. But at the end of it, when you got your feedback, some of them I had either 10 or I had a 1. So what was happening is that as I was moving around, they got myself and the other black guy, because we were both bald-headed, whatever, and they just got us mixed up. So where he failed, he got my points. So this happened, but at the end, John Anderson was there, and I just said to him, there must have been some confusion, because you've had me down as a 1 or a 0, but I actually broke the record for that particular event, or I had the time required for that event. John, all he had to say to me was, well, if you knew that at the time, you should have contested it. I'm like, I'm too far in the zone to step out to see what was going on and what mistake. Too busy being the best. Too busy being the best, and just this, trying to annihilate people along the way.
So from there, I had my next audition, which involved wrestling, some more fitness testing, and then they personality profiled us on camera and got us to be gladiator characters. I then got the call to say I'd got the job, and went to see the producers about the contracts. And it was then I was like, have you got all the male gladiators? And they said, no, we're looking for a really big black guy and a big white guy. And I was like, oh, funny you should say that. My partner had this terrible mix-up in the auditions. And the producer went back, looked through all the tapes, saw how amazing Wayne was in his audition and fitness test. And then they called him back in, and then he ended up being a reserve for the first series.
Gosh, that must have been incredibly stressful. You've given it your all, then there's this horrible, that is such a great story, by the way. It wasn't at the time, obviously. But then there's Jenny kind of getting the calls, getting lined up for the contract, with everything, the imaging starting to happen. And that must have been just in that tiny period of time, that must have been so difficult for you, Wayne, until you stepped back in and said, well, wait a minute, look back at the footage, because there was a big, you had to almost back that up. Otherwise, that could have slipped under the net and you wouldn't have been doomed.
No, totally agree. And it was, because by our very nature, we're very competitive and we're super competitive with each other as well. So when that happened, when you have your partner going, I made it and I got the... and someone's doing like MC Hammer around the room. We had the most awkward train journey back home after the
yeah, Wayne really sweaty and really angry, and
really
happy.
We did not talk to each other for an hour and a half on the way home.
Longest we've never talked to each other. And then as soon as they walked through the door, it's having to listen to the conversation on the way home, like call in. I think her dad kind of knew, although you weren't supposed to say anything, but she rang her dad to say thumbs up, which meant she got it, and having to listen to this and then endure her smugness. No, but tell them about like how it really worked out, because your costume for your...
Yeah.
So Wayne was reserved for the first series, which was a good thing.
Which was a good thing, because, we won't talk about names just yet. So the name didn't actually fit me as a person. Do you want to talk about the name?
Yeah, because it's Stealth, wasn't it, originally?
Yes, it was. So it was Stealth. And basically I just had a pair of hot pants and they didn't know what to do with me.
And a couple of straps.
So it wasn't even a couple of straps. It was just one strap that came across, nipple guard, from one waist to the other. And that was it. So the name I didn't really enjoy. I didn't enjoy the costume. There wasn't a lot of imagination that went into the design and the character. So albeit, yes, I was quite agile and quick. My favorite event, even in the training that we did, one of my favorite event was Earthquake. So it's the wrestling and the Powerball, as well as the Gauntlet. They were my ones. But the name didn't really fit and the costume didn't really fit. So, when we were on standby, it was like, right, okay, please don't use them. Please don't. I don't want to step out into the arena with this costume. And once you step into the arena and that you're known as Stealth, then that name will forevermore be yours, as well as the costume. So in a way, I'm kind of glad that didn't happen.
Go head-to-head with Tornado. David's facing Powerball first time at Doom. The Big O will be roaming free.
One question that I wanted to ask was, obviously, did you have any photos taken as Stealth? Are there any photos of you in your costume? Or did you kind of not get that far where they obviously didn't take photos of the reserve kind of standby gladiators?
There were photos, but it never got circulated.
They weren't official press shots?
No, they weren't official.
With a bonfire behind you?
No.
And Jenny, obviously, with the tryout, one of your best friends who became Ice, Caroline Pierce, did you actually compete against each other in the tryout, or was that totally separate?
So the first tryouts, we were with potential contenders. So I didn't meet any other gladiators on the first trial. And then the second one, Caroline and I were actually put into two separate groups. So I never ended up competing against her, which is kind of ironic because we spent most of our lives competing against each other. But then, so I remember being put against this bodybuilder for the wrestling, and neither of us would give up. And I remember John Anderson like blowing the whistle and saying, "No, we'll stop the fight there." They were just like two headlocked rams. I'm this will end in death. So no, I didn't compete against Kaz.
A little bit more on Caroline. I remember meeting her at a fitness convention and just being blown away by this stunning icy blonde lady who I was introduced to as Caroline by a fellow kind of a fitness journalist friend of ours. And she was mentioning gladiators at the time, and I thought she would be absolutely amazing. So then I met you and I thought you looked like Diana Rigg, and I thought these two glamorous, amazing girls to come back back and be our gladiators for our revival. It felt amazing, actually, because I think I first met you in the corridor backstage during the filming of one of them, because I think Hunter, James and I were doing the little videos backstage. You remember that?
Yeah, I was like, oh my God, it's Jet and Hunter. I'm going to pee my pants. Like, I spent my childhood wanting to be you and wanting to marry Hunter. So to meet you both at the same time in the arena was like the most ridiculous afternoon ever.
And she's off. Leanne hurtles her way into what must surely be the most intimidating event of all on Gladiators. Enigma's really making life difficult for her here, pushing and pushing her back. But all those hours in the gym have given Leanne some real stamina. She's giving everything here. But Enigma is fighting back.
That's the first question for me when it comes to this revival episode, is the fact that a lot of the gladiators that we speak to, they didn't know what was to come. And even the ones that were sort of joined in a bit later on, they kind of knew, they'd kind of seen it, or they hadn't seen it that much. But you must have spent so many years watching gladiators during the 90s. And suddenly now you know kind of what perhaps the expectation would have been in terms of your personality, your character, what the events would have been like. So it kind of almost gave you a bit of a little bit of an inkling. I know that revival series, there were differences, but at least going up and getting ready for it, you kind of already knew what it was like to be a gladiator.
Yeah, and as a sporty kid, I used to come back from a swimming gala or an athletics match on a Saturday, and we'd all have a family dinner and then sit down and watch gladiators. And then you would pull out the pillows and have a duel fight with your brother and sister, or I would play the games in the playground. So I grew up with it, absolutely aspiring to be a gladiator. Like, if you asked me as a kid what I wanted to be, it was, I want to be an Olympian, I want to be a gladiator and an actress and a model and a millionaire. So it was in like my mix of ambitions from probably like 10 years old. And I can't think of any other aspirational humans that I watched on telly, apart from athletes and Olympians, where I was like, oh my God, I want to be these guys. They're amazing. They're everything I believe in and aspire to. I want to look like, I want to think like, I want to perform like. So to then become a gladiator was an absolute childhood dream come true.
Briefly on that, because I know when you've been doing a lot of acting for many years now on both, I don't know if you've done theatre, but particularly small screen and big screen. But Jenny, to add to your list that you've just reeled right off, Wonder Woman. You've actually been in both Wonder Woman films. The one we're still, the 1984 as well. That's a great extra accolade to add. Was it good?
It was very different to Gladiators. The first film, we trained for 8 months at Warner Brothers, and it was a mixture of stunt training and physical training. So they really wanted to bulk us up, but also teach us how to fight with swords and shields, ready for the movie. So it was a really big process. And then the second film was absolutely incredible because they brought me back as the lead trainer for all the Amazons, and they made me an Amazon. And then I also trained Kristen Wiig as the lead villain. So the second film was just like the most incredible, amazing 9 months of my life, because I got thrown into the middle of this £100 million blockbuster movie where I became one of the lead trainers, and I'm one of the first female lead trainer in Hollywood history. And then Patty Jenkins, who's the director, also was like, Jenny, would you like to be an Amazon again in this one? I was like, yes, Patty, that would be the cherry on the cake.
Good luck, Jenny. You're the first contender to take to the rings, and you are facing Enigma.
Not one to shy away from conflict, fit and feisty Enigma will be on the attack tonight.
I followed you on social media now for a while. I think you're so different to the Enigma character on Gladiators. So the ponytail with sort of the moody pout, the woman of few words. This is not you.
I mean, I do pout a lot, and I am prone to wear a ponytail, particularly when I'm working out. But no, it's like my alter ego character. However, when I competed, I would be very aggressive and single-minded and narrow-visioned, and probably not be very chatty or funny or laugh so much. So I think it linked well with the kind of person I am when I do compete.
But would you have preferred more cheers than boos?
No, I wouldn't. I was happy to get boos. I I wanted to stand out and create a connection as the character. And I felt like I really did that as Enigma. And I don't think you can have the light without the dark. And I wanted to be either at one end of the spectrum or the other. So I was happy to get the booze and really carve out this very strong, unique character that people understood immediately.
Enigma came out more in the second season, I would say, as well.
Yeah, I think I was more comfortable being like the bad one by the second season. And we ended up getting more acting training during the second season too. And we started to really own our characters. And instead of worrying like, oh, people don't like me, I was like, actually, it's great that people maybe don't like me, because that's very much part of the character that I've created.
She's clearly not happy with Enigma and makes her feelings known, and the crowd doesn't seem happy either.
Okay. Good game, good game. 1 point for Wendy, 2 points for Catherine. Congratulations to you both of you girls. But John, our referee, has got a couple of issues with some things that he wants to explain to us. So come in, John, and tell us what's happening. What happened, my friend?
I noticed that Enigma committed 2 offences against the blue contender. So as per the rules, 1 point for each offence extra to blue. So that makes blue 4, red 1.
Thank you very much, John. So, Enigma, what are you going to say for yourself?
Ian, my engines were fired up. I was feeling pretty ballsy today. I only put her in a little spin now and again to give myself a slight advantage.
That reminds me a little bit about when we started the original series. Mike Van Wyck, who played Wolf in the original series, he was sat in the middle of the arena before they'd rigged anything up, and we literally walked in with our training bags on, training gear, going, what are we really facing here? And he was sat on the floor with his legs out, and I've actually tripped over them because he was sort of sat in the semi-dark eating a bowl full of rice and chicken. He said, I don't want to be the baddie. I want to be loved. I want to be known as the lover. I want to be loved by everybody. And to wind forwards in time and then listen to you say that about being a female baddie, I think that's tougher in some ways, because again, it's that risk of taking on a character and not being liked as a woman and being a good female baddie. And you did it. We didn't get it in our first series. And there you were. Our times were wrong.
I didn't actually necessarily plan it that much in the first series. It just evolved that way. And then I remember Wolf coming in and going to him and being like, Wolf, how do I be a better baddie? Both of us, we sat with him for hours like, what do we do? Like, how do we connect with the audience and make it fun but really encompass our characters?
I think that was a good thing as well, because Wolf, everyone knows Wolf. I don't think, even probably on his gravestone to be the Wolf. But he was a huge inspiration for us during the season, because a wealth of knowledge, and he would, and certainly for us, because for me, my character, I didn't want my character to be light necessarily.
You succeeded there.
I succeeded there because for my character, it was live into the doom. And this is the difference between stealth and doom, in that stealth was, for me, stealth was too nice, whereas that's not for me. That wasn't really me, because every time I competed in something, there's a different person that came to the fore. It was like, okay, we'll stick Wayne in a box and stick him behind, and we bring this nasty person to the front, competitive person. And sitting with Wolf and having this conversation with him, and Wolf is like, okay, well, if this happened, then do this. And, if there's a moment where you can just tug a leg, do it. And if, you get an opportunity to like really get the crowd to boo you, then do it. And one of those notably was, there was a contestant called Justin Speedigon. That was his name. And he was a superb athlete. And, we had a really good battle throughout the season. And there was the suspension bridge, which they brought in for the first time. And, I remember John Anderson, he gave us this rule that, because he would watch all our tactics, and then he'll come up and say, well, you're not allowed to put your knee on the bridge. If you do, it'll be automatic disqualification. So, so you have all these rules that's going through your head while you compete, and you try to adhere to it. But Wolf will say, don't worry about it. So,
bend the rule.
Bend it slightly. So I remember in the, in the competition, we're on the suspension bridge, we ran towards each other. And then there was a little trick that I would do without it was doing like an Achilles, Troy from Achilles type move. move where you do a long lunge and then knock the contender off, and it almost worked. But then this Justin dropped to his knee and then countered what I was going to do, so knocked me off. And I was irate. And I remember being interviewed afterwards, and he was like, "Doom, you lost." And I was just angry. And to the corner of my eye, Justin was laughing at me. So the only reaction was to just throw him in the water.
I had the plan set from the start. He wasn't going to stop me in this one. Nice try, mate. Nice try.
Doom! What happened?
Doom, first of all, doesn't need to explain himself. And right now, I'm feeling pretty evil.
Caroline Flack, bless her, didn't know what to say, so I just walked away, and the whole stadium, the arena just booed, boo, and off it went. And I got back, and Wolf looked at me and went, "That was really good, loved it. Do it again." I'm like, okay. But then John Anderson came afterwards, and he said, "That was out of order. You shouldn't have done that. Why did you do it?" And I'm like, "John, it's like, I don't really want to talk about it right now." Because I was up against Justin again in the Powerball, and he said, "You're going to receive a red card." I was like, okay, fine. And I think I might have been the first gladiator to be sent off even before a competition started, because we did the lineup, and then John Anderson went, and because of the misdemeanor in the previous event, Doom, you'll receive a red card. Just sent me off, so the whole arena just booed again. And Wolf was like, "What the hell?" And he went mad, and I was going mad. And I didn't talk for the entire evening because I was just so angry. And John was like, "I'm really sorry I had to do that," because it just made for entertainment, and it just lent to your character, because, everyone just wants to boo you. And it's, which was quite good, because at one point someone went boo, and they went, "No, do." So they kind of changed the whole concept and went with the character. So it was quite a funny experience, but thanks to Wolf.
That was one of the memorable moments that Producer Paul actually picked out as well, wasn't it, Paul?
It was, yeah, getting sent off before the game actually started. I think that is definitely a gladiator first. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before. Actually, talking about your characters, I think one of the things that the fans have always felt is on the Sky version, the characters that the gladiators had were quite different to the original series. And it's been really interesting hearing you both kind of talk about how you developed those characters yourselves, and they kind of weren't given to you as such. You kind of, that's where you wanted your kind of gladiator characters to go to. I heard from Siren, Amy Guy, that the gladiators were actually given a number between 1 to 8 about how kind of evil or bad they should be. Kind of like 1 being the nice smiley gladiator through to kind of 8 being the kind of really moody grumpy one. I just wondered, what numbers did you guys obviously have, and kind of how did that kind of chat go with the producers?
Well, they lined us up in like a spectrum of happy, smiley to evil during one of our acting classes, and Amy Guy was number 1, smiling and tigging with her teeth and wiggling her little hips, and I was number 8. On the dark side of the line. And Wayne?
I was an 8.
You were an 8 too. And Wayne's lucky number's 8, so maybe that's... maybe it's a good thing.
I didn't know. We had none of this in the first series at all. I think we were just sort of given a name and then sort of... But I think there was a line in the script which was, and cut to Jet. Ulrika do the introductions. Jet, much posturing, and that was about as much direction as we got. And of course, being an ex-gym, there's a flip flap, anything to keep moving, because I didn't want people to see my bum. That aside, I'm really curious, because you came from a background of training, so our characters are there, we formed our characters, you're going in the arena, you've got some idea of the events, because obviously, like us, you can't actually train on the events until they're rigged. You trained all your lives as athletes. How did you then really have to adapt your training and attitude to training to become a gladiator? Did it have to change dramatically, or was it just an extension of? Because I know you know your sports science, but both of you. So what was that transition like for that period of time?
So before we went into filming, we had, I think it was 4 weeks of training in a warehouse with like small versions of most of the events. That was for the first series. Yeah. The most difficult part of that training was to get the skin hard on your hands. And
Hang Tough.
For Hang Tough, like I remember Atlas ripping his hands and me making a joke that if you peed on them, it would harden the skin. And then Wayne went to the bathroom and found him peeing on his hands. We were like, it was a joke.
Cricketers do it. Athletes do it. It'll work.
So it's kind of adapting your skin. And then a lot of the events were grip-based. So like the wall and hang tough, even dual when you were gripping the pugil stick. So a lot of us ended up with slight bicep tendonitis. So it was a real toss-up between how much training you could do and then be okay to practice the event. So when we were working in the warehouse and working on the pyramid and hang tough and tackling for all the different events, we actually trained a lot less in terms of weight training because you couldn't end up gripping the barbells, the dumbbells. And it was that offset of trying not to lose too much size, especially for the guys, and be able to practice the events ready to film.
What was also really nice with the training prior to the actual competitions, that everyone, the gladiators, had some form of skill which they could contribute towards different events. So, you had like wrestler's background. I had a wrestling background. Probably the two that I couldn't beat. In fact, no, there's only one guy that I couldn't beat within the wrestling. And that was Warrior Dan. But everyone had a skill set that they could bring and they could guide each other towards to make them a better gladiator in particular events, from powerball to the climbing, hang tough. And some people took to hang tough very, very well, like Cyclone. Amazing. She was very, very good.
But she had a gymnastics background, whereas Oblivion, obviously, he had the wrestling background, and he brought that huge drama to our wrestling practice and made us like bigger and more confident in that way.
Wayne, we've spoken about your memorable moment that we picked out. Jenny, do you know what yours is?
Would it be like tickling Bianca Gascoigne on the hang tough?
Enigma stalks her. She's got hold of the ring and pounced. Gives her a little tickle under the arm, would you believe? Bianca didn't see the funny side, though.
Did she tickle you there?
She did tickle me, but I'm not very ticklish under my arm, so that one didn't really work. If she got my stomach, then I would have dropped straight away.
Okay, so what about Bianca? Was she a good catch?
You know what, Ian? I thought being a Gascoigne, she would be like a Premiership game up there. Instead, it was like a Sunday League match.
Oh, no, Enigma. She's so horrible deep down sometimes. Doesn't matter. Come here, let me give you a hug.
The one that we had down was the Series 1 injury in Gauntlet, quarterfinal 2, with possibly one of the rudest contenders ever in Leanne Lennox.
Oh, she was an angry lady, wasn't she?
Yeah. Well, because she went on that injury, she went before the whistle, didn't she?
She went before the whistle, and I ended up pulling a little bit of bone off with the ligament. It's quite horrendous.
Before the whistle, that's a false start, and Jones trying to get her to stop. Can she hear it? How will the referee sort this one out? And Leanne has reacted really badly, kicking the pads into Enigma's face. That's really bad sportsmanship, disgraceful behaviour. She's angry. She won't like John Anderson when he's angry. Enigma's furious.
Oi, you and you, come here.
To get off now.
I don't know where you think you're coming from, but I can tell you where you're going. If you behave like that again, you go straight out and you're finished. You understand? You suppose so. Tell me properly or you're going. Do you understand? Then go.
Oh, that's it for Leanne. Johns disqualified her from Gauntlet because she would not apologise for her behaviour after she false started. A lesson for any future contenders on this show: never mess with John Anderson. And we just saw the medic come in to see Enigma. It looks like she's been injured. This Gauntlet is tough.
It was towards the latter end of the series, and I always remember that night because I got carted off to hospital, called Wayne. He came with an inferential machine.
Yeah, so basically I got this tearful cry, oh, my ankle and blah, blah. And I think I had a meeting somewhere and I rushed, because the way it sounded, it was like really bad. So I rushed to the hospital, got there, and there was Enigma in her costume in the waiting room with her leg up up. And then
hospital bed.
And I was like, so I ended up treating her. I went back to because I wasn't being used at the time. So I went back to the hotel room with her.
We should explain Wayne's a sports and injury specialist. So he was the guy to call for me.
And basically right throughout, and this is the caring partner. So right throughout the night, while she's asleep, I would put tubic grip on her ankle. I'd ice it and then I'd ultrasound it. And I did that every hour throughout the night while someone is snoring. But you recovered.
I recovered so quickly within 3 to 4 weeks, which normally it takes 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I was going to say you could hardly stand like afterwards, could you? And I mean, didn't you try and whisper to John Anderson as well that you needed to get off and that he didn't quite hear, and he just kind of turned to Leanne and kind of said she needed a better attitude, and she was a bit like, oh, I suppose so.
Yeah, I thought I'd broken it, and I was saying to him, you need to get me off, you need to get me medical assistance. But the arena was so loud, and I think poor John's a little deaf, it was lost in translation. And so we carried on filming like the end of the scene, and then eventually I got taken off.
Well, and that was it for the rest of the series for you as well?
No, I did end up coming back and doing hang tough with the ankle strapped.
So you didn't need to worry about the ankles so much, just hanging.
Exactly. And I also ended up doing hit and run because it was minimal weight on the ankle. I think we only had 2 or 3 episodes left, and I still filmed a few of them after Wayne's wonderful medical care and healing me.
Well, I mean, that is caring to taking it to the next level. We've mentioned John Anderson a few times. How was he? Because he apparently wasn't too keen on how the series was going and didn't want to return, and obviously he was replaced by John Coyle. But you'd obviously grown up watching him as well. So what comparisons did you have with the man you watched on telly in the 90s to the man you were then with for the Sky series?
I think I had a slightly different insight into John Anderson because he was a heptathlon coach at Loughborough, and I'd known him for years, and I was very good friends with some of the athletes in his group and had grown up with him at track and field events. And he also had a real soft spot for athletes, which I still was. So I had a really nice relationship with him, and he was only ever like helpful and kind. I don't know what you felt.
No, I found him the same way. He was helpful and kind. And I think, from previous gladiators, Diane and, James, all those guys, they've set a precedent. And I think John wanted to meet those criteria, meet those barriers or bars that had been set by previous gladiators. But I think the people above had a completely different view. John was still very old-fashioned in his way of thinking and what he wanted. And the people above were looking at the bigger audience, trying to pull old Gladiator fans in with a blend of the new Gladiator fans, but John just had a completely different outlook, and and he had his ways of how people should train and who should do what, and things like that, and it just wasn't met, and there wasn't it didn't sound like there was a compromise.
I think John's very black and white too, and he likes it to be the way he likes it to be, but with such a huge show and with so many new producers and characters and a different vision for it, I think it was quite hard to meet him where he wanted to be.
Yeah, what you mentioned the costumes as well, Wayne. What did you prefer? Did you like the diamond studded versions or the versions you had for Sky, or do you think you'd have liked the original Lycra versions?
Ooh, that's a nice one. No, I preferred mine. Sorry, Diane.
I was going to say, God help the audience if Wayne was in one of your flimsy original Lycras.
I'm not sure that would have been the right.
Been a very different kind of show.
No, I preferred. There was a lot, certainly in the second season of the Sky One Gladiators, there was a lot of thought that went into the costumes and the separation between the good characters and the bad characters. You had your black outfit characters and your more
silver.
White, silver, diamond studded.
And you
contenders.
helped develop your Doom character.
Yeah.
More theatrically.
So certainly with Doom's character, after the first one, I went away and thought about how to be different to everyone else, you know, because you had Demar, who was Destroyer, who was, you know, shaven-headed black guy, very clean shaved. Then you had Dwayne, who was also a bald-headed guy, clean shaved. Tornado was the same. We went away and I had a long thought about it. How could I be different? So that's why I came up with Jenny and I would, you know, say, what about, you know, growing a goatee and maybe, you know, grow a beard, Ming the Merciless beard. And yeah, we really thought it and thought, yeah, that'd be really good. And when I had to do the trials again for season 2. And while I was there and Warrior was also there as well, because we had to go through the whole trial, the whole scenario again. And this time I just went, you know what? Whoever is in front of me, I'm just going to destroy. And that's how the name Doom came about, because Steve Jones, who was part of the management board, he was there watching. Richard Wolff couldn't make it down on the day. And so the first guy I came up against was an American wrestler. And I completely, as soon as the whistle went, it was a wrestling doing the earthquake. And as soon as the whistle went, I faked a move and I snapped him down on the floor and pinned him on the floor. It happened within seconds. And the guy jumped up and he was effing and blinding and went off on one. And he's like, do it again. And they went, no, you've missed your move. It's like, I wasn't ready. And he made all these, and they went, okay, fine. So I went to do my move again, knowing that he was going to counter it. And I did the opposite move, snapped him on the floor again, pinned him, and he went off in a huff. And Steve Jones just went, bloody hell, he was doomed before he even started. And then the next contestant I came up against, we had to do the pugil stick, and it was just literally whistle goes, and it was just last man standing. So again, it went off, and I just head down, and I kept going and kept going. And then someone put their hand on my shoulder to say the whistle had gone. And I literally stopped, took a breath, looked up, and the guy was cowering. And then Steve Jones just went, another one doomed. And then they all kind of went, found the name. And then it was like, brilliant. And then that's how the name came about.
Talking about some of these events, one sort of another criticism that you get perhaps from people comparing the original to the revival is that you very much played the same games show after show. I guess fans also perhaps wanted a bit of variety, and I think from speaking to some of the original Gladiators, sometimes they got put on the events they were weaker on at the start in the heat and then got moved to sort of the ones they were better at later on. Did you feel restricted at all, and were there any games you wanted to play more of?
So we talked about the spectrum of characters from 1 to 8. There was also a spectrum of gladiators to events. So for instance, like Battle Axe and Panther were put on dual all the time, and then we sat in the middle, so we could be put on any event, and then the lighter ones like Cyclone would be put more on Hang Tough and the more gymnastic events. So it naturally sort of happened that way. There was 2 or 3 of us in the middle that would move around to different events, and then 2 or 3 on the edges that would either be more like strength or more gymnastic. And on top of that, they had some legal requirements where we were not meant to go against contenders who we had previous contact with in life. So I remember Battle Axe had competed against one of the other contenders, and she could never be put in events with her because there might be a bias in the way that they competed. So I remember she was quite annoyed towards, I think, the end of the second season, because she wasn't being put into any events because this girl had got through to the semi-finals and the finals. So there was a mixture of reasoning, I think, behind the different events we got put onto.
Enigma shows she can be just as brutal. This, one of the roughest pyramids ever. Both girls getting punished. The gladiators are dominating here.
It was a very hard one, wasn't it?
It was. I got kneed a couple of times in the stomach, and I just wanted to give a good fight. This is the final. This is what it's all about, and it's giving your total all to the gladiators and trying to make them work hard for it.
Well, I thought you put up a great fight. The pair of you, I've got to say, ladies, you looked pretty awesome on Enigma first.
I've got to say, that is the best pyramid I've ever played. Undefeated, 2 series. Good game.
One thing I absolutely loved about your show was the sort of gathering of the elements. It made it visually very exciting for me, but also you added the element of water for some of the bigger falls on some of the big events, which for us in the original series were usually the bone of contention for our serious injuries. Do you think it really, really helped that you were falling into water, or was it like really necessary to be able to swim very well.
It did not help with the hair and makeup. And the drying out of the costumes and the heaviness of the trainers. Do you think it was?
No, I really enjoyed it because it added something different, and I could see what they wanted to do in bringing old and new together. So in some ways it worked, and in other ways, like saying the costume and the hair, that then didn't work, because especially if they made a mistake and put you on another event straight after, it's like, get in, get done, get out. So it could create a little bit of complications in terms of, moving around the events and things.
But I think they wanted to create a different feel from the original series. So there were links, but then it also stood alone. And we had like the fire behind us in our press shots and in some of the events, then the water, and it was much darker, edgier, which worked in some ways, but not in others, because I suppose you couldn't see us as much. And it didn't look like you were in the middle of a great, like, athletic stadium. You felt a bit more like you're in a nightclub. When we did the Legend show and we did the Eliminator course in sections, I thought it looked incredible then when we were diving into the water and hang tough in the water, create that big impact and splash. But then it was also kind of lost because you didn't have the cleanness or the fact it looked like a gymnastic arena with the mats underneath you.
Yeah, I think they want more of that moody kind of feel to it and draw people in that, these guys are like real badasses. So there was that type of feel to it. But like I say, when you're looking back, the aspects where you think it's a bit nightclub-esque.
Well, you mentioned, Jenny, about the comparisons to the original series. Do you feel like the show went far enough to become different? Because I remember there being a contender from the original series who competed again, and there was a contender's daughter who competed, and it was referenced quite a lot in the audio, whereas for the other revivals in America and Australia, they just totally ignored the original series.
Did the other shows in America bring back any of the originals, like Wolf?
No.
Okay, so they approached it very differently then.
Because there were still links, wasn't there, throughout, even though we're talking about these differences. There were. Do you think it was needed?
I think the original series was such a huge part of the culture in the decade it was shown, and they were trying to bring some of that forward and recreate it. And I think that's probably why they reference, bringing back Wolf and Jet and Hunter and doing the Legend shows and then linking back with the contenders. I don't know if it always worked though, because like we were saying, they created like a nightclub feel with fire and water and then brought back some of the like John Anderson.
Well, I felt like if there was another, season 3, 4 or 5, then there would have been a slow transition to being completely different. I think what they had to do is to bring back the old Gladiator fan with some references. And then season 2, there started to be a change. And season 3, I think there would have been another change with that as well, to slowly make it its own thing, but having that link between the original Gladiators to the next generation of Gladiators. And if it was to ever come back, I think it might be the same thing again, a slow transition to make it its own show altogether.
Oh, that's one of my questions, Wayne. Should Gladiators return?
That's a tough one. I want to say yes. Because, it has there's a huge following with Gladiators, yes. But it has to be something different and something unique to make it completely different to what it was, and something new to allow the fan. I see something along the lines of maybe Ninja Warrior-esque type thing with the old Gladiator theme thrown in there. But I don't know, that old family sit down watch, that's now gone, because growing up and watching the original Gladiators, you sit down the weekend and you're ready for it, and, dinner on the lap, and you're watching and you're going to see who fails. And, and for me, it was like, I was ready to watch Saracen and Shadow, because, it's like, what's Shadow going to do? That's now gone. Those family days are now gone. No one wants to sit down anymore. No one really has the time to be able to do that. So I think if it was to come back, it would be a tough ask.
We were talking off camera, well, before coming on to the podcast earlier, and I think you talked about Ninja Warrior. There was the element of people relating to their favourite gladiators, and as gladiator to other gladiators, we talked candidly about maybe something like a top trumps, where you select gladiators with Wonder Woman, like special powers or special stats, and that the audience can choose who can contend, and of course the events would be modified for health and safety, blah, blah, blah. But there's be something, maybe a re-rendition in that, because everyone loves the Marvel heroes right now, but, you know, some sort of concept to be evolved. Just putting it out there, everybody. Why not? Like a top trumps.
So with that, within the acting world, there's something that came up in like, how can we get audience participation? So it's to make a film with 3 or 4 different endings, and then it's down to you as the audience to direct the characters to where they go and what the ending was going to be, whether it's they find love at the end, or they find death at the end, or do they drive off in the, whatever it is, whatever that ending. But it's something that's being worked on at the moment in how they can do it. And that's a great idea with Gladiators. So you pick your characters who you want, and then, you know, you direct them towards, because if it's a good contender, then you kind of go, right, okay, we're going to put these guys against him or her, and then boom. Yeah, that's a really cool idea.
And I agree. There's 2 questions I had for you before we finish. So there were rumours behind the scenes that the Series 3 was going to be, they were going to try and film it at the National Indoor Arena in Birmingham. Did you hear anything on that? And my second question is really just, why did it end so early?
When we first went into Gladiators, we were told there'd definitely be 3 series. And the third one, we heard rumours that it might be bigger and better and go to the NIA. And then there was a huge shift in the management in Sky, and they brought in a new director of programming. And then suddenly so many of the shows changed. And I think even like the producers, directors, the costume guys were surprised, because they were all set to make 3 series of our Gladiators. And then it was just axed.
Yeah. So what happened was at that time, so Steve Jones left and he moved to Australia. Richard Wolff, he also left. He moved to Channel 5, I think it was. And then someone else left. And then they brought in a new director of program from BBC 3, which was all to do with comedy. When he came in, he looked at the cost of the show. So the story goes, looked at the cost of the show, deemed it was too expensive, and was looking at ways of how to reduce the cost of the show. But you got to remember, at the time there was,
I think, reality
Towie
series
started coming in. They found it was going to be cheaper. So
and drew like bigger audiences. So there was this big shift away from the shows, and that cost so many thousands to make. And we just went into the recession as well. So I think there was a big shift within entertainment and television into more cheaper reality shows.
Yeah. So it wasn't just Gladiators. So if you look at all the game shows at that period, they all got axed, and then reality shows came in. So I blame Richard Wolff and Steve Jones for leaving.
One thing as well is Gladiators was so big on merchandise, and neither of you got to have an action figure, did you? Although I think have some fans, you're always been very keen on fan interaction as well. So I know that the fans feel like they were able to get a lot out of you. I know you did fan workouts and fitness challenges as well with Gladiators TV. But do you wish that you did get an action figure?
Of course. Yeah. I wish we had that. Well, some of the fans made you a hybrid.
It was a hybrid
Predator, and like painted Wayne's costume and then changed the packaging. So Wayne does have his own Doom doll.
It's a one-off.
It's a one-off hybrid.
So I'll auction it in another 25 years. I'll auction it.
But yeah, I wish I had a figure. The only one they made was Inferno. I remember her having very large bosoms on her on her merchandise. But yeah, it's a shame they didn't make all of us. It would have been very cool to have a series of us.
What about the reused names for the revival, like Panther and Siren and Warrior? Because Panther came back to compete against Panther. Do you think they should have perhaps gone a bit different and tried to do all different names?
I think they should have done different names and maybe been a little more PC with some of their names. I think the fact sometimes they put names with ethnicities is just outdated, and there should have been a plethora of interesting, new, incredible names that they could have used. Do you know that Justin Lee Collins came up with Enigma? Here you go. Here's a little fan insight. So Justin Lee Collins, the comedian, was at a Sky One event and he was chatting to Richard Wolff, who was the head of programming, and he was like, can I call one of the gladiators? Can I name one of the gladiators? And Richard's like, yeah, text me if you think of one. So apparently it came to him in a dream to call a gladiator Enigma. And then I ended up being christened Enigma. And we met him at a press event. And I was like, hi, Justin, you're the guy who gave me my name. And then he wrote his number and autograph on one of his cards and gave it to me. And I was like, this is my partner Doom.
So I've got one question. If Gladiators was to come back for another brand new series, would we see Enigma and Doom back in the arena?
I think we should.
I think we should.
I think you've got to it would be amazing. I think we're still in awesome shape. It would be interesting to be a legend coming back, which I'm sure all the other guys felt. But yeah, it's incredible. We're like some of the few humans in the world that have been christened gladiators. I think when you become a gladiator, you always are one. And it's a very special experience to have had in your life. And if they asked me back, I would definitely put my rhinestone encrusted lycra back on and dust off my ponytail.
I think it might have been you, Dan, that said it right at the start, in that, you know, that period when Gladiators first came in, you got to remember there weren't that many channels, you know, around.
We only had 5 channels.
5 channels. So, you know, so everything that yourselves did back then was a huge impact. And because it made, certainly for me, it made me want to be fitter, stronger. I want to be in good shape. You know, I want to be that all round, like, supreme athlete, which is what Gladiator presented to the world. You know, so every child wanted to be the Jet, the Lightning, the Hunter. You know, every child wanted. And as they got older, you know, they find that, yeah, I'm going to stay in shape because I want to be like, you know, and I still have people now that's like, you know, Jet was the one that made me the way that I am today, or Wolf was the person that made me the way that I am. So there was a huge impact with Gladiators, the original Gladiators. And it would be nice that I think the next generation of Gladiators, you know, our generation of Gladiators had that. It would be nice if we had that impact that you guys had on the nation.
It's also Doom's debut on Earthquake, and he'll want to prove himself to his lord and master, the Wolf.
We're talking about the Legends and the Legends episodes. I mean, there were 3 special episodes, and generally, actually, they were the highest rated in terms of sort of the viewing figures. Were there any original Gladiators that you two would have loved to have come back and competed against? I mean, it did seem like the producers wanted the Legends to be beaten by the Sky Glads, or to not look as good as them. Was there any goss, any rivalries?
No, I think there was with Oblivion and Wolf. There was, because Oblivion created his character and he wanted to be the modern version of Wolf, but it worked to a degree. But you got to bear in mind, Wolf is one of a kind, and he created the character which was one of a kind. So it would be very difficult for anyone to emulate that.
I think with the girls, we were just like, or with the female gladiators, we were just like giddy girls. I remember Caroline being like, oh, I'm going up the wall with lightning. It was hard to have a rivalry because we were in this incredible show. We were gladiators, and then we were going against our childhood heroes. So it was this strange mix of excitement and, oh my goodness, this is the most amazing thing ever. And, oh yeah, I need to really try and win this. Yeah. All at the same time.
Well, I think that was nice from the female gladiators, but I think for the male gladiators, it's the egos, because it's like, it's Wolf, okay, we need to like destroy him. You know, it's Trojan, like, don't give him any mercy.
Yeah. and then we had the funny experience that actually Wayne is older than Hunter. So Hunter was a legend, but then there's Wayne, who's actually older than him, but in the new series.
Speechless. That just goes to show what you both are made of, in particular yourself, Wayne. That is incredible. And yeah, the rivalry between the two generations of gladiators. I think I had to take a step back. I'm not quite sure where I was at that time in my life, but I remember it going on and feeling a real kind of like yanking on my silver umbilicus towards the world gladiator of, oh, I wish I was still fit and strong enough at this time in my life to be maybe chasing you. Jenny up the wall. That would have been so awesome.
I was so gutted you didn't come back for the Legends. It would have been amazing. Like, everybody wanted to see you. You were like the true star of the show. And yeah, it's such a shame you didn't come back. I would have loved to chase you.
I've got a line here from producer Paul, which is Enigma. Mysterious and beautiful, contradictory and unpredictable. Wayne, is that a good assessment?
I'll put that down, yeah.
Is that how you would describe me?
Yes,
really?
Absolutely, yeah.
But for Wayne, yours, mere mortals beware. There's a dark cloud that looms. Judgment day is afoot, and doom is your worst nightmare. Jenny, is Wayne your worst nightmare sometimes?
Yes.
Not now we've got a dishwasher, because the cloud of doom is less over my head now that I don't have to wash up. No, Wayne's not. He's a beam of sunshine.
I think the
unless he's hungry, then he is the ultimate cloud of thunderstorms and doom.
One question I always ask, which I can't believe we haven't got to it. Favourite events?
I had a few, but definitely Powerball was my favorite. And then I would say Pyramid, the Pursuit, the little obstacle course that I had and you finished in the water. That was my second favorite. But in the first show that I did, I slipped on the beam and took a chunk of skin out of my leg, which then affected my performance there, because I couldn't really say that I had an injury, because once you say you have an injury, then you pulled out, and I didn't want to be pulled out, and I wanted to be competing. So that affected me in a way with some of the courses, but definitely Powerball, Pyramid, Earthquake, and the
just all of them.
But all of them. All of them. Powerball, definitely the favourite one.
And my favourite was Pyramid. I distinctly remember a few shows in being at the top of the pyramid and having this realisation of the position I was in, and having this absolute immense feeling of power, and deciding that I was Enigma. This is what it meant. There was no way anyone was getting to the top of this pyramid. And having that marrying of it being a show, but also you being a performer and a competitor. And it all suddenly came together at the top of that pyramid. And from then on, I felt like I owned myself in the events much more. And there's something really, really fun about tumbling someone down the stairs. And then there was a special technique of kind of pushing them as you got up, and it winded them a little bit and stopped them getting up so quickly.
Someone taught her that.
Okay, now it's the boys' turn to be pummeled and pounded on Pyramid. They'll be facing the mind-blowing might of Predator and Doom.
Do you know what? I would love the chance to speak to you both again. Would that be okay on GladPod in the future?
Of course. It's been a lovely way to spend our morning chatting to you guys.
And from all of the team here, I'm sure everybody listening, Jenny and Wayne, and known to the rest of the world as Enigma and Doom, thank you.
Wow, there we go. Doom and Enigma on the GladPod. So not one revival gladiator, but two. So we waited series one. We didn't have any revivals then, and we've got two on. I loved it. I loved how it brought a different dynamic having two guests on who were obviously next to each other, were able to sort of vibe off each other and jog each other's memories. I mean, they are just still so competitive. And the one thing I took away from that is they're still uber fit. They really are, the pair of them. But even with yoga, Wayne is still very competitive. It was a great chat, wasn't it, Paul?
Oh, massively. And I know that it's always little bit controversial talking about the revived Gladiator series on Sky, but it's something that is part of the Gladiators history and we have to cover. So to have two for the price of one, I think was amazing. And obviously their personalities just shone through. And like you said, I think if Gladiators came back today, they could both definitely still be Gladiators and join the team again, I think.
It was interesting their route to becoming a gladiator in that, I mean, it sounds like Jenny was quite forceful with the fact that A, she wanted to be a gladiator, and B, she wanted Wayne to be with her, and just how supportive they were back then and how they are now. And actually, I think Jenny was kind of fangirling over Di a little bit, don't you? Because she said about how, you know, meeting Jet and Hunter for the first time, but she wanted to grow up to be Jet and she wanted to marry Hunter. But I guess, Di, when you met all these new revival gladiators for the first time, I mean, they were all kind of looking up to you, but you must have been looking at them thinking, these are some amazing athletes.
Absolutely. I think that evolution of gladiators had made it so we really were selecting for, I mean, it was Sky, wasn't it? And they knew they had to. I think they'd taken a lot of notes from myself, I think Hunter and Wolf, of course. They brought us in as a forum, and we said, please try not to overly choreograph your new gladiators, which they did, but it worked because, like Enigma and Doom, they took it tongue-in-cheek, but the ultimate thing was they have to be super fit, good all-round athletes, not just look the part, because it's quite a serious place out there in the arena, and they both embodied it brilliantly. And as I've always been a bit against the kind of contrivedness of it all, but Jenny as Enigma, she just loved being a good female baddie. And apart from our lovely Vogue, of course, Susie, we didn't really get to do that in the original series. So, yeah, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I was surprised by that, Paul, actually, that she quite enjoyed being booed, and how with the revival it was very much more character driven, kind of a bit more acting training for like the series 2, sort of very different to the original show, and also about them lining up 1 to 8, good to bad. I mean, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, no, that was really amazing to hear that, because we'd always heard that that's what had happened with the gladiators, that they'd been lined up, even so far as kind of the costumes, like the black costumes were supposed to kind of show that the gladiator was bad, and then the silver grey costumes were more of the goody gladiators. But what I thought was really interesting was hearing Doom speak about how when he was stealth on series 1 and he was a reserve gladiator, how he was actually so glad that he never kind of made his debut as stealth, and that he could kind of really focus on his character, creating Doom kind of with the Ming the Merciless beard, and that he really wanted his character to stand out amongst all of the other gladiators, which, like I say, is something that we didn't really have on the original show. It was kind of more natural. So to hear that they actually thought that that was a good side of it, and that they put so much effort, and that the producers obviously kind of for series 2 brought in kind of more character driven kind of acting training for them as well. It seems like that's definitely a direction that they wanted to kind of differentiate between the original series and the revival one.
And one thing that gets brought up as a very obvious comparison between the original and the revival is the water element. And actually, because we've always spoken so much about it, about, the mats and perhaps the water, it being safer. But the one thing that Jenny mentioned, which being a man, I hadn't really even thought about, was the fact it didn't really help with hair and makeup. Whereas I guess to an extent, the mats would have been dyed, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I mean, the mats still did get smothered when you face plant after a pyramid or whatever, and red lipstick marks all the way down them and stuff. But it's not the point. I mean, yes, for the girls in the revival, getting dumped into a pool at the end of the event was probably going to then amount to another 2 hours in makeup to get refreshed and ready for the next event to record. I'm pretty glad we had mats, even though the injury rates because of the mats was just extraordinary. Probably wouldn't have been able to enjoy the events quite as much if I'd been over water. So hats off to them. I mean, it's a case of, original show, you might just break your neck, but in the second show, the remake, you might just drown. I thought, either or, what you could have had.
With the water element as well, it was really interesting to hear, obviously, not only were the hair and makeup and the costume soaking wet, but I actually heard rumours that Inferno, who had the dyed really red hair, she was kind of restricted from doing some of the events due to falling in the water and obviously having the dyed hair with the chlorine and stuff like that. So I think, Inferno, if you're listening, we need to kind of get you on and talk about that and see if that was true or not. But even with the original series, if we did have the water, I don't think we would have had the amazing costumes as well, because obviously they were dry clean only. So I think there would have been a lot of ruined costumes going on if we did have the water in the original.
And I'm just picturing Stephen Adnett running around the arena going, no, my costumes.
The other thing, Di, because obviously you were involved in both, that you can perhaps relate to a bit more, like the way that they described the arena was almost like being a bit more of a nightclub. Would you think that was a fair assessment?
Do you know, I've just, I've come across that now. I hadn't thought that internally, if you were working in that arena, it would have felt like that, because I was always backstage with Hunter, with James, recording some up-to-date last-minute sort of background interviews with the guys. We weren't pretty much on set most of the time. Can't speak for the other Glads and what the original Glads who did go into the arena and compete. It was tiny. It was a shooting lot as opposed to the NIA, which of course is a huge 9,000 live, is it, capacity? It would have had a nightclubby type feel, I guess. It just felt, it lost a lot of its energy, but actually there's something quite intimate and quite fun about it. And I love the way they shot it, because they still managed to make it look quite big, even though dimensionally it's quite a small and intimate place. I think, nightclub analogy is quite right.
Another thing that I thought was interesting about the Sky one was obviously what a lot of the Gladiators community kind of always talks about is the reused names. So obviously we had Panther, Warrior, Siren that were kind of part of the original and the relaunched, which was a little bit strange when you had kind of Panther versus Panther, Siren versus Siren in the kind of the legend shows. But Di, what do you think? Because they didn't recreate a jet over here, which I think they probably couldn't do anyway. But in the American Gladiators relaunch, they did have a jet and a wolf, and they were very much kind of based on your characters as well. What do you think about knowing that there was another girl in the American show who was called Jet?
I think over the years, something my lovely late father would always say to me is that impersonation is the biggest form of flattery. So I'm actually really quite moved by it, thinking, oh wow, why would you ever want to recreate another Jet? But I suppose, and I'm still keeping contact with a couple of the American Gladiators, and they're very fond of the fact that they did that, because it seemed like a real a nod of the head type of thing to their younger show, the British show, which was the second one ever to go out across the globe. And they really wanted to kind of embrace a part of what we'd added to their show, as they see it, to kind of keep the spirit of some of what they see as successful elements or images of certain gladiators. So I'm really, really, really flattered. And I know some elitists out there will be like, but there's only one Jet. I am that woman, and I'm not that possessive about anything in my life. So I'm like, yeah, bring it on. How fantastic. And what a, privilege. I'm flattered.
Also, it was really nice hearing kind of Enigma and Doom talk about obviously going up against the Legends, which I think was probably the highlight of the whole relaunch, was seeing the Legends come back to compete against the new Gladiators. And obviously those were the highest rated episodes as well from the Sky version. But just hearing kind of Enigma talk about obviously going up the wall against some of the Gladiators. Ice, she mentioned kind of going up the wall against Lightning, and Ice did a really lovely speech at the end of it, just saying how she couldn't believe that she was not only a gladiator, but then she was facing her kind of icon from back then. And obviously, Di, it would have been amazing to have you back in the arena. And I know that they definitely did try to get you to pull the Lycra back on again as part of the Legends team. And it was really interesting to see how they did it as well, because at first, when we heard the rumblings that the Legends shows were going to go ahead, we thought that the Gladiators would be kind of doing a full show, where it was very much kind of like a team event where the Gladiators didn't have to do every single event. They could select which Legends kind of were doing individual events. If the producers had managed to kind of convince you to pull on the Lycra and stuff, was there any of the games that you perhaps would have wanted to have given a go from the revival show?
Of course. The Wall and Hang Tough, my two favourite. Yeah, that would have been fine. It wasn't the right time in my life to pull my Lycra back on. I'd probably had to sort of use a lot of oil or whatever to get it back on my body at the time. I wasn't up for it physically. I think I was carrying another injury. I've had problems with my back on and off over a few years. I remember thinking, it was part of me really wanted to, but then I was more comfortable by that point, just holding onto a mic, and I'm very nosy, so I like asking lots of questions. So the little presenter role backstage kind of fit me a little bit better at the time. But yeah, Hang Tough and The Wall, it just goes without saying really, but it would have felt so different from the original. Neurologically, my body would have been going, this is the same but different, like when you're in a strange dream. I know this place, but it's different. So no, I was happy to be just walking around wielding a mic and questioning everybody else about their experiences.
Di, thank you. Paul, thanks again. Hopefully you all enjoyed the first of many, hopefully, revival episodes. Let us know who you would like to hear from that revival series. Let us know who you want to hear from, full stop. And producer Paul will try and make it happen. Not so much for me and Di. If you've got any questions or got any memories you want to share with us of watching Gladiators, send us an email, gladpod@gladiatorstv.com. Don't forget, as always, to follow us on Instagram and Twitter and like our page on Facebook.
Good competition, good spirit, great sportsmanship as both contenders show mutual respect. Join us again next week for the ultimate challenge, the might of...